children. Well, today I've brought you to Ferney, which is in the district of Grand Port on the southeast part of the island. I've brought two children with me. First of all, I'll introduce you to this pretty young girl here.
Hi, I'm Sensini.
And now?
Hi, I'm Tishveer.
So children, we've come to this spot because it is a very important place in the history of Mauritius. It was here that the first Dutch sailors came in from the sea and they landed at this very spot. We've even put a monument here to show where the first Dutch sailors came in to Mauritius.
Uncle Alan, who are the Dutch?
Good question. The Dutch people come from Holland, and Holland is in Europe.
Were the Dutch the first people to come to our island?
No, the Dutch were not the first people to come here. The Arabs and the Portuguese sailors came here first, but they did not settle here.
In 1598, while Dutch traders were crossing the Indian Ocean on their way to the East Indies, their ships were caught in a violent storm. Strong winds and high waves caused 3 ships to be separated from their fleet. Strong winds blowing during the storm filled the sails of these 3 ships and pushed them towards our shores. Finally, they landed here at Grand Port. The Dutch named the newly discovered island Mauritius. This was because the ruler of their country, Holland, was called Prince Maurits van Nassau.
Uncle Alan, what happened next?
Well, the Dutch, when they first arrived, they needed some shelter, and then they rested. They explored the island and found it covered with dense forests. They cut down the wood and used it to repair their ships.
What did they have for food?
Well, first of all, they collected clean water from the flowing rivers for their long journey across the Indian Ocean. They hunted bats, parrots, dodos and tortoises on land and fished in the lagoon, so they had plenty of food for their journeys. They then left the island and continued on their long voyage.
At first, the Dutch used to visit Mauritius on their long voyages from Holland to the East Indies, known today as Indonesia. They went to Indonesia to buy goods such as spices. During their voyage, the Dutch ships also stopped in South Africa at Cape of Good Hope, now known as Cape Town. For many years, they used Mauritius as a convenient stopover for making food and water provisions, for resting and repairing ships.
You've probably heard of Peter Both. He was a great Dutch governor. Once, when he was visiting Mauritius, the ship in which he was travelling was caught up in a terrible cyclone. They tried to make for Tamarin Bay on the west coast, but unfortunately the ship turned over and Peter Both and all the crew were actually drowned. There is a mountain here named after him, Peter Both Mountain. The Dutch didn't stay here at first, but in 1638 some of them came to settle here.
Did the Dutch stay for a long time?
Yes, some of them did.
Who stayed?
Mainly officers, soldiers, and woodcutters.
What did they do and how did they live on the island?
They cut down ebony trees, which fetched very high prices in Holland. This wood was in great demand for making expensive furniture and wooden houses. They built a fortress at Vieux-Grand-Port to defend themselves. This fort was called Fort Frederick Hendrick.
What did the Dutch bring to Mauritius?
They brought animals such as goats, cows and pigs. They also brought deer from Java. They also brought plants like orange and lemon trees, sweet potatoes and vines. The Dutch were the first people to cultivate it at Ferney, and from the sugarcane they made a drink called arrack, which is similar to rum. Later on, sugarcane was also cultivated on the plain known as flack on the eastern side of the island.
Did the Dutch work the land themselves?
No, they didn't, because tilling the land was very, very hard work. They actually brought in slaves from Madagascar, India, and the East Indies. Now, do you know what a slave is?
Yes, a slave is someone who's forced to work without any pay.
That's right. But the slaves were very ill-treated, and sometimes they ran away and hid in the forest. Sometimes they attacked the Dutch settlers and burnt down their houses. They were called marron slaves. In 1601, the first Dutchman arrived in Rodrigues. His name was Wolfert Harmensen. He didn't stay in Rodrigues very long, but he came then to Mauritius.
But did anybody settle in Rodrigues afterwards?
Yes, in 1691, a Frenchman called François Leguat travelled to Rodrigues.
He settled with his friends at the mouth of Grande Rivière near Port Maturin. They built some huts with tree trunks and leaves from the latanier palm. They also grew vegetables and ate them with eggs, birds, seafood and fruit.
François Leguat kept a diary in which he kept records and studied animals and plants that he saw in Rodrigues. He studied the solitaire, which was related to our dodo, and it was called the solitaire because it was often seen by itself. Unfortunately, the solitaire became extinct, like our dodo. Life was very good for Leguat and his friends on Rodrigues Island. The climate was very, very good indeed, and they had very little illness. They enjoyed life there, but one thing was that they were very lonely, and also no ships ever called to bring them tools that they needed. So in the end, in 1693, they built a raft and sailed to Mauritius.
Did the Dutch stay in Mauritius for long?
Unfortunately, children, they didn't. They had to face many problems. Cyclones spoilt their crops and destroyed their houses. Rats and monkeys destroyed their plantations and ate their provisions. The marron slaves damaged their property and also stole their goods. There were many pirates in the sea. They used to hide themselves and attack ships that were passing near Mauritius. The Dutch were afraid, and they finally left Mauritius in 1710.
So, did everybody leave in 1710?
Yes, almost everybody left, but I'll tell you about that another time, children.
Well, children, let's look at what you've learned in today's programme. In 1598, the Dutch reached the island accidentally during a storm. They landed at Grand Port and found shelter. They found many birds and animals on the island, including dodos and tortoises. There were also plenty of fish and fruits. The Dutch built their fort at Vieux Grand Port and called it Fort Frederick Hendrick. The first settlement in Rodrigues was made by François Leguat in 1691.
Well, children, that's all we've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed our programme on the Dutch in Mauritius and Rodrigues. So we'll all say goodbye, children, everywhere. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Now here's a little exercise. Please answer by true or false. The Dutch landed in Mauritius because they were caught in a storm. True or false? When the Dutch came to Mauritius, they built a fort in Ferney. True or false? The Dutch brought slaves from Madagascar. True or false? François Leguat was a Dutch. True or false? The solitaire lived in Mauritius. True or false? The Dutch left Mauritius in 1710. True or false?